All right, so today I'm going to be reviewing the book George Jackson, Soledad Brother. It's a collection of his prison letters. George Jackson was born in 1941 in Chicago, died in prison. He was accused of stealing, and though there was evidence he was innocent, he was convinced by an attorney to plead guilty, and he was sentenced 1 year and ended up spending 10 years for that charge. So that's something that is actually very common today, is the attorneys will pressure people into confessing or saying that they're guilty just to avoid a trial. The person who is charged is under some sort of scare tactic because they don't really know. And with the justice system, they're threatened that the justice system will be even more harsh and they're more likely to get worse charges. So they're incentivized to plead guilty even if they're not guilty. So really how this book, with it being a collection of letters, not really going through each chapter, just what I found in the book, that in his letters that I found that were thought-provoking. Just wanted to go over stuff in that nature, like his approach to nonviolence protesting, which is something that we are pretty much brainwashed in America to think is the only way to get progress, even though it does not work and has not worked. We're still without healthcare. We're still incarcerated. We're still being executed in the streets. His position on nonviolence is it presupposes compassion. So that's what I also find is an issue with nonviolence today, is we keep assuming there's compassion from our elected officials and from the media, and that there's no evidence of that. And it presumes that there's going to be mercy and restraint, which 2025 people are being sent to prison camps, so it's just that assumption just seems to be incorrect. So when we are calculating our nonviolent movement, we have to assume that there's going to be compassion, mercy, and restraint, and that just does not seem to be the case, especially with cop cities being erected all throughout the country. The plan is to get worse. I mean, the cops have been proudly trained by the IDF, which is committing a genocide. So if they're able to do that in Gaza, imagine what they want to do to Atlanta or something like that. He says status symbols, supervisory positions, and petty power motivate their actions. So essentially, this is a big obstacle to forming movements, is other people within your own demographic. They're going to put status symbols like cars, a nice house, nice watch, whatever capitalism trinkets can offer. People will pride themselves to earning those and having those over actual justice. Supervisory positions, of course, we all know what it's like to have that middle management, the popularity contest that is middle management, how people aren't actually more knowledgeable on the job. However, they are getting paid more and being promoted. He got on George Jackson had his opinion on Bill Cosby as an establishment agent, which makes a lot of sense. Bill Cosby, just before he was even convicted, always had problems. In my opinion, I never was a fan much of his politics. He always accused black people that their sagging was why they're in the conditions they are in. And that just seems, narrow-minded and ignorant and racist. So he says that U.S. blacks are the most brainwashed throughout history. And I mean, there's a lot of evidence to support that. Just the stealing of their language, enslaving them for 400 years. They're not allowed to read or write. So, even Jewish people had their Torah. Even Native Americans, had their land and their culture still, while Black Americans, we're not allowed to have anything, to even be dependent. Otherwise we're called the racist. There's more starving people in the U.S. than China. So I just looked this up. The AI confirms this is the case. So for all the things we have to say about China and capitalism and communism, China feeds their poor while we do not. So there's that. As far as he brings up executions by the state, 50% executed by the state are black, 100% were poor. So at that time when he was taking that measure, I'm not sure if it's the same today. But I mean, to me, that just was eye-opening in the sense that the executions and killing people for crimes, that's just an attack on poor people, because wealthy people never get that type of punishment. They're always with a slap on the wrist. So, and they are guilty of killing hundreds of thousands, like what Elon Musk did with the government, cutting aid to foreign countries. Uncalculable how many people died, or no one wants to count how many people are dying because of that. He talks about like a blanket indictment of all white people is silly. So to sit there and say all white people are your enemy makes no sense when you have black people who are going to be cops, who are going to enforce fascism, who are going to oppress you. So you won't be prepared for how multicultural fascists are if that's your mentality. So I thought that was very enlightening. It makes a lot of sense. And I mean, like currently, like the last time I looked up the modern Black Panther movement, which was years ago, but their leaders or their people on their YouTube videos, not claiming they speak for anything, but you were hearing a lot of kill white people coming from the modern day Black Panthers, which makes no sense, just as a strategy. when you're only 14% of the population, the idea that you're going to take out what makes up 60%, again, bad strategy. He talked about how the Pope approved Mussolini in Italy. So Mussolini, of course, doing the genocide in Africa. I forget the country. Starts with an E. But so, I mean, pointing out that the Catholic Church has been a part of a lot of the oppression, a lot of the genocide, and just the massive hypocrisy of that organization. And, so, I mean, nowadays, this was before they were found out to be a child sex trafficking ring. There's still not really much accountability towards an organization that claims to be of some other dimension. They really are not holding themselves to that standard. So he was pretty misogynist in the book, but him being in prison since he was a young man, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to read past. He said women shouldn't be listened to, but later in the letters you find that he was a huge fan of Angela Davis, highly sexual towards her, but still respected her in an academic sense, where early letters showed that he had no respect for women in that regard. He says protesting, looking for justice where it is not approved. So, I mean, he just has this like cynical view of protesting. Like, they don't want to give you justice. Protesting is just like a useless activity that they approve, but they don't approve of the justice. So just very interesting there. I would like to say protesting has worked, but I'm like, George Floyd is still being demonized in the media. So I'm like, it's hard to really disagree with this man. When poverty comes to the door, love leaps out the window. So it just shows how poverty, he talks about how poverty has been weaponized. Like, it's a choice to keep certain communities in poverty, especially in America. And this choice has been consistently made towards certain demographics. And then just the consequences of poverty, where people like to individualize it and make it their own fault. And just the reality of that type of mentality of someone living in poverty, how emasculating it could be, how hard it is to escape. He said U.S. was Mexico was a U.S. colony. Couldn't confirm that at all. I know America took a lot of land from Mexico through war and treaties, but yeah, is that the same as colonization? I think so, but that's not what the internet says. So we're just going with the internet. Not one time in European history has there been peace. It's a point he made. And, it's like European warfare versus like the Native Americans before Europeans got here, that type of warfare, versus Africans, if Europeans wouldn't got there, that type of warfare. It's like, is it better or is it worse? Like, is that something that can be measured? It's really hard to say, if it can be taken out of the realm of personal opinion or like, I can see that. However, I can see a colonizer sitting there saying that, Native Americans were savages and eating each other and pushing that. So I think it'd be hard to really, make that point. Only 1/4 of sorrow is caused by the outside. The rest is a failure to analyze. So a great point. Like, you take these hits from society, it only takes so much and the rest is internalized. And I mean, the book, the letters, full of just very great academic, just nourishing information. For him to be able to come up with this stuff in a prison cell is like beyond amazing. Like, we have access to pretty much every book on the internet and not one show a fraction of his intellect. The fall of omnipotence leads to insignificance. So that is something that America is like teetering towards, is it went from an all-powerful nation to approaching a very insignificant nation. Same with Israel. Man is born free, but everywhere is in chains. And I mean, in his worldview, he sees every level of American society as being institutionalized, from an employee having to serve your employer to, of course, being in prison. So there is no way of escaping the chains of capitalism. It definitely is a great point there when you consider that so much mental health problems are caused by society. However, like, the mental health industry cannot fix society, so they help you cope with it, right? They give you a medication and therapy to help you cope with society. So, I mean, he's like addressing it right, like grabbing the bull by the horns with that point. Blacks overestimated whites out of reflex. So it's just something that to keep in mind is white people we're overestimating them. And that comes, like, there's evidence there when like Donald Trump and Elon Musk take over the government and fail and continue to fail at every real way you can measure them. So it just shows how overestimated whites, especially with money, are. The environment brutalized man, not opposite. So, I mean, he makes a point that he doesn't make this point, but analogy to it would be when you're going to fix a seed, a flower that's not blooming, you don't fix the seed, you fix the environment. And that's essentially what he keeps making the point over and over again, is the environment is reproducing these problems. Black racism is a survival adaptation, which very interesting point, you know, because you hear a lot about reverse racism, and it's really hard to get people to understand where that's coming from when you have a group of people who want to take your rights away, want to see you in prison, that don't even see you as human, to sit there and be like, look, cannot trust you. We're actually fearful of you. You know, that response, that is just an adaptation to the harsh environment that is a racist society. So a very interesting point there. And then the last thing I'm gonna lead with is him saying that there is no way of detecting when your last rights are gone. You know, so at this point, rights keep being stripped away, and you won't be able to tell when the last of your rights have been removed until they start shooting you down, until you get gunned down. And then that was just an amazing point. It's an amazing book. Definitely recommend. So let me know if you are interested in anything else. I'm definitely a big fan of this genre of, you know, prison reform and civil rights. So definitely let me know if there's any literature you would like me to check out. Please leave a like, subscribe, comment. See you in the next one.